Welcome to our podcast, What We Don't Say. I am Belina, and my co-host is Pretty, or goes by Pretty. She is Pretty.
Why, thank you, darling.
And today we're going to be discussing why Black families don't talk about mental health. So Pretty, when I come up with that one, what initial thoughts come to your mind?
Initially, I think of the different families within the Black community. So I think of families in the township versus families in your suburban areas or urban areas. And I think having the experience of both, that topic it's quite broad, especially considering how the different demographics actually targeted based on the information and the knowledge they have of any mental issues or behavioral disorders that might exist within people, and how it is approached and how it's handled. So I think when we think of Black communities, it's automatically you think of your typical townships in the your typical families in the townships, which is actually where I grew up. So their view on it was very normal. There was no such thing as being depressed. There was no such thing as having schizophrenia or being autistic or any kind of mental or behavioral issues or even depression as a whole. Their understanding is that, you know what, when you're depressed, you're sad. And I think this also touches on our last episode where we say depression versus sadness, where it's just you have everything in life. Why would you be depressed? And that's the typical thing. I mean, we see videos where we joke about it all the time, where, your Black mothers will say, hey, you have food on your back. Your food on your back. You have food on the table and you have clothes on your back and a roof over your head. Why would you be depressed? I'm not understanding that it's way deeper than just your materialistic things or your everyday necessities versus your families who are a little bit more. And I don't want to put intellect, and I don't want to bracket it and say no, families in the township are less educated, but let me say that they're less exposed to how they would handle depression and exactly what it means. I don't know what is your take on it, be?
I mean, I think that part of it is tackling certain stereotypes, because there can be that you're not depressed, you're lazy. And I'm sure we'll be able to find a TikTok clip or some clip that will speak to that. But actually, there's a comedian, a Latino comedian at the moment in America, who speaks to how he wasn't allowed to be depressed. And Latinos, they're like, they're spicy Africans. So he talks about how he came home from school and his teacher says, he says to his mom, his teacher says he might have ADHD. And his mom basically says, no, you don't have that. You're going to have to find something else. You're going to have to get something else, because that, you don't have that. And that was the end of that discussion on his mental health in that family dynamic. So why does it become you're not depressed, you're lazy, you don't have ADD, you just find things 10 times more exciting than other people? And like, is it really life or death situations when it comes to certain mental illnesses? Like, I'm thinking generational gaps, because sometimes when we don't have the information, we create our own stories about what mental illness can mean as Black people, when we don't have, you know, because because with the internet, I guess we have a lot of access to potential information, but in the bush, in the villages, symptoms of mental illness, from what I've understood, are calling cards almost to become a traditional healer. And what space is there in kind of understanding that that way of understanding mental health may actually complement or contradict some of the ways that hospitals deal with mental illness. That's something that's kind of been on my mind for a while.
Hear what you're saying. You touched on a very important point that I wanted to expand on in terms of in in the rural areas. Now that's a different demographic altogether compared to your urban areas and your townships. Now in the rural areas, you touched on being a traditional healer. Now when you are seen as quote unquote crazy, and you're doing abnormal things or you have abnormal behavior.
Yeah, the same alarm.
That is seen as you've been bewitched, and it's automatically it's the conclusion is you have been bewitched and you have an issue and you have a problem, and therefore let's run to the closest traditional healer instead of actually understanding what mental disorder or behavioral disorder that person might be suffering from. So you're absolutely correct. It is a lack of information and research within those kind of areas. But how long can we hang on that? You know, how long can we hang on us saying that, no, listen, it's a lack of information? I mean, we can argue. I remember I was having a conversation with an older citizen, and they told me that, yeah, but you know, depression and ADHD and ADD, they didn't, and bipolar, they didn't exist back in our day. I'm like, they were definitely there. They were definitely there. It's just because people aren't being diagnosed medically doesn't necessarily mean that those things are not there. It's just it was treated differently, and again, because of a lack of research and information back in the day, it was automatically it was ignored, or just people would turn a blind eye, but it was absolutely there. And people did suffer from anxiety, people did have depression back in the day. It was just something that was seen that no, this is not what it is. And because people didn't know what else it could be, that's why it's so easy for us to say, no, you're just lazy, you're not sad, you're not depressed, you're just really lazy, you're unmotivated, you don't care about life. And those are such harsh terms to throw on such a very delicate topic or delicate issue like depression. So absolutely hear you what you're saying about comparing to the rural areas as well, which is another demographic area.
So let's try the idea of religion versus therapy. Can you just go to God with your problems and do as the people before us did and leave it to God? Pray on it, fast on it, find the words in scripture that help you keep a balanced mental health? Or is therapy absolutely needed in some cases? The first thing that comes to my mind about religion versus therapy is that one is usually a lot less expensive.
Yeah.
Going to God is very cost effective. Results, I I don't know. I don't know the results. But therapy, in my experience, therapy will leave you with with a question mark. It's constantly a question mark. Like, I've never had a conversation with a therapist where I was like, this is a breakthrough, and I am going to be viewing life from a whole different lens based on this interaction, which is pretty frustrating to say.
Therapy leaves you with a question mark. And the therapist doesn't lead you to the solution. Would you just say that about religion? I mean, if you're going to talk to God, and I'm going to be very literal, if you're going to talk to God, I mean, God is not really answering you right there and then. You have your questions and your frustrations that you are expressing, but you don't really receive. I mean, yes, I know people are gonna be like, yeah, but prayers are answered. Yeah, yeah, I get all of that, but I mean, you don't get an answer right then. Doesn't that also um leave you with a bit of question marks as well, to be like, why me, Lord? To wouldn't you say that's more or less the same thing?
Yeah, I think by I haven't had enough therapy. Well, I've had more than most, but I haven't had enough therapy to, uh, with a consistent therapist that I trust, for me to really say that it's it's saving grace. And right now in my faith, I'm just, I'm reading through the Bible. I'm reading through scripture, and I'm doing it with a hopeful lens, but still a little bit unsure about how this book, the Bible, is going to give me every answer that I ever had. Excuse me, that I ever had questions about. So, the go to God answer, I think it really does help a lot of people. I think, for example, um, my my dad used to say when we were growing up, God made man and man made religion. And then a few years into living in the UK, he just quietly left the house on a Sunday morning and never came back. No, 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 that's a dark joke. He quietly left the house and went to church, and has been a church goer every week since then, pretty much. And that was just something that he had a spiritual calling to do. And whatever was going on in his life, it just, God was God was somewhere there at the answer answer yard. So I know that it does work for some people, and honestly, just being the personality I am, I find church, like, I'll say it. I find church to be as comfortable as masturbating in public.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm saying it, and I'll tell you why. I find it uncomfortable to have what is my spirit shared. It's me, it's my nakedness, it's me and my relationship with God. It's a pure relationship. And then I come into this building, and there's a lot of people coming into this building, strangers, with their own relationships with God. And then we sing some songs and we do some rituals. But at the end of it, it's like, it's almost like anonymous masturbation, spiritual masturbation. To me, that's just the that's just the feeling I get when I get an icky feeling when I go to church. Um, Not when I'm reading the Bible, but yeah, in terms of the culture that it creates, it's like, yeah, it just feels like everything's possible. Everything is every sin is open to, you know, forgiveness with the right tithe. And there's something that I've seen some really unsightly behavior um, from, you know, older elder members of the church, and it just left me with an icky feeling. I I do pray, but I'm not someone who's going to gather and with strangers and do a prayer. I don't know the spiritual cleanliness, you might say.
Yeah. And I think I think that is from a religious perspective. On a spiritual perspective in the African culture, now for me personally, I'm not religious at all. I think the last time I saw the walls of a church was when I was quite young, and I think if I go back in there, I'll probably burst into flames. But for me, I follow the African culture and I'm very in touch with my ancestors. And for me, it works very differently. So I've had experience in all I have experienced the divine intervention in all methods. So yes, when I was younger, we used to go to church, and I never felt the religious connection. I walk in there and I see how people feel so anointed and so in touch with the spiritual realm, and I've never felt that when I was in church, but I always knew, I always looked around and I was like, I love how people feel so connected by being here all together, and feeling the spirit of the Lord Jesus Christ. And it was, for me, it was like, I want that. But this is not it. This is not working for me. But I can see how it works for other people. And growing up within the African spiritual culture and being exposed to that, that's where I found my spiritual refuge, when I can speak to my ancestors. And, whether it is through, because first and foremost, I do pray. I mean, I do believe in God. It's just, I'm just not Christian, but I do believe in God. And, the first thing we do, pray, and then we talk to our ancestors. And I think that entire ritual, it brings me comfort. It brings us comfort, and we can easily say, "Yeah, but it's because you were raised into that." Yes, that's true. But I had a very liberal family. My mom, she was a very open-minded person, and she was like, "Listen, you need to find what works for you. We have exposed you to everything, to religion, to African culture, to this, to this. Find what you believe in and trust it." And my mom always used to say that, listen, we can go to traditional healers, we can go to church, but if you don't have faith, it's not going to work for you, because your faith could be as small as a mustard seed, but that's what's going to move the mountain. So if you don't have that, you are literally going to be stagnant, and you're going to be so spiritually confused that you're going to find forces that are going to influence it and make you spiritually vulnerable. And I think having a parent that gave us that, to be like, here's the world, find what works for you. People can turn and say, "Yeah, but you still picked this." Yes, I still picked the African culture, because it's the spiritual culture, because that's what I was drawn to. Compared to my other siblings, my older sister, she loves church, she loves the art of prophecy and all of that. And grew up in the same house, same parents, but had different influences, and we took different things out of there. And even now, and then my experience with therapy, it was more on a more that I can express myself in a language, number one, that I mean, it's very hard to speak English to your ancestors. It's very hard. Even though they say no, they understand you, but it's you feel as if you're completely not hitting the mark. But for me, it became I could express myself better in therapy, because I felt like, okay, we're on the same page in terms of my emotions, but also with westernized therapy like your psychiatrist and your psychologist, I found that it was more medical, it was more practical, it was more biological, so it made sense. We put one and one, we get two, it makes sense, compared to a spiritual realm where it's more, listen, here you need to completely let go and trust the forces around you to guide you. And I think letting go of that type of power within yourself, it takes a lot, because when you are going through depression and you need to try and balance the two, it is the hardest thing ever. And that's when you start getting spiritual wars within yourself, because you don't know that, okay, what is working for me now? Who do I run to? And when you're depressed, you're in a very dark place. So immediately you're in the dark place, it's very hard for you to identify the light. And whatever gave you light then at that current moment is just not shining bright enough. So I think clinging on to those things for me is what helped me a lot. Yes, prayer, I'm not going to lie, I found prayer very therapeutic, because my prayer wasn't just based on our Father art in heaven. I mean, that would be the greatest introduction, but it was based on, I am talking to you, Lord, and I'm going to shout at you and I'm going to tell you exactly how I'm feeling, and you're going to listen. But after I do that, I'm going to call on my ancestors, because they're my guardian angels and they're guarding me, and you sent them, God, to guard me on earth. And hey guys, let's all be on the same page. So for me, it was a beautiful let out of frustration. If I can't do it to the person, I can do it to God, I can do it to my people. And we call them, my family and I, we call them the underground gang, or board members, so to speak, ancestors, quote unquote. So it's, yeah, that's how I found it. But I think the further and further I move out of home or away from home, that's where I realize how important it is for me to stick to those things, because I don't have my parents over the shoulder saying, hey, listen, did you do this? Did you pray? Did you do this? And I now have to solely rely on me. Now that's where the teachings and the learning and unlearning came from. I wasn't always not religious. I grew up in a religious family. We grew up in church. I was a Catholic girl, but soon after that, I was like, church is not for me. And thankfully, and I'm so grateful for this, my mom was like, okay, no, that's fine. If church is not for you, you don't have to go. And I stopped and just like find what works for you. And when I found it, my mom understood, and she's like, cling on that and give it your all. But in the same light, when you grow up in the Western world and you realize that there's also therapy. Who says you can't use all tools? You can use everything, because like we said in the first episode, there is no manual to this life thing, and it is our first time living it, and it's a trial and error. So we try until we find what works. You just need to understand that when it works, then you need to keep at it, and you need to be resilient, that it's not always going to look beautiful. And African spiritual culture is very scary. It's very scary. I'm not even gonna lie. It is, when you enter that Ndumba, and Ndumba is the hut of a traditional healer, it is scary, because you are literally entering a spiritual realm that us as the flesh have no business being part of. But we are saying, give me access. And once you enter there, you can't go back. The things you experience and the things you dream about, the visions you get, you can't go back. And growing up in also in a family of traditional healers as well. My grandmother was a traditional healer. I had with her mother as well. So we come from a long line of healers. And also being raised in, Caucasian area, or being surrounded by Caucasian people, and having to now switch. It's very hard, because last night we were chanting spirits and talking to our forefathers, and today we in assembly and we are singing the Lord's Prayer. So it's very hard, and experiencing that and being exposed to that in a very young age was, I can't say it was hard as in it's supposed to be easy, but you need thick skin to be able to understand and comprehend and accept and be resilient of the things that your spiritual self will be exposed to. And it's a different escape altogether. Yeah, so it was very hard. It was very hard, and for me, sometimes I do sometimes battle with that. At the age I am now, I do still battle with that to be like, what is true? What is correct? Am I on the right path? God, are you there? Am I really my ancestors? I mean, I can feel you. Are you there? So we do go through that. But the next day you'll be like, yes, you are there. And yeah, it's quite a deep one. Sorry just to go that deep, but yeah, it's quite a heavy one.
Have you had chats about mental health with your family?
Um, yes and no. Yes, because of my recent experiences, and being the first one in the family to ever go to um, a psychiatric hospital, and to formally be diagnosed with depression and ADHD. It was it was a conversation that it was more of questions that they would have, but for them it's coming from, oh, but it's they don't want to understand. Actually, I don't want to say they don't want to understand it, but it's just it's not coming from a place of, actually tell us more about your condition, and which is the questions I would have loved to hear. To be like, tell us more. How do we approach it? What does this mean? How do you feel? How does how do you antidepressants make you feel? How do you, those are the kind of questions I would have loved to answer, but instead I was met with not a negative thing. I was met with support and and love, and that affirmation that, listen, your family's here and we're here for you and all of that. But did we have that conversation about it? No. It was, I still think that even now, if I was to tell my mother that, mom, I have ADHD, those are just a bunch of letters to her. And it's not maybe something that she's probably absolutely hasn't heard of, but it's like, oh, okay, there's a pill for it, right? Okay, you'll be fine, right? Oh, okay, cool. All right, as long as you're good. So as long as you as long as you mask it well and you can still survive in society, you'll be fine. So, have we had that conversation? No. Are they aware of that I am slightly different? Yes, because of the events. But is it something that maybe in future we'll actually sit around the table and say, hey, listen, let's actually understand depression. Let's understand this a little bit more as a family. I don't think it's going to happen. But that's fine though, because I'm not here to teach them. I've realized that, and I think through therapy it has taught me that I'm not here to teach people or my family. Let me say that I'm not here to teach my family about those things. I'm here to show them how a person of my condition lives. And if you can understand that, and if you have your questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I'm not going to teach you something you don't want to know. That's the truth. If you don't want to know it, then it's fine. Let's move on. But because now it's going to seem as if I'm rambling and I'm giving you information that you did not ask. So it's difficult. It's difficult because it does get lonely. It gets very lonely because you feel like there's certain behaviors that they don't understand. Like if you want to sleep the whole day, and it could be seen as, oh, she's lazy. If you sleep the whole day, you're just lazy, but all you do is eat and sleep. But they don't understand that how much it takes for you to get out of bed, and for you to actually get yourself out of bed and say, let me go wash my face, let me go brush my teeth, let me go have a sip of water, and to beg yourself to say, it will be okay, just get yourself out of this rut. And for you to actually open that door, that bedroom door, and say good morning, they don't know how much it takes. But it's okay. It's not for them to know. It's for them to see that Pretty has woken up. And if that's all I can show, then that's enough. That's enough. As long as there's no harm and there's no ill intention, I'm happy. Because Ignorance is not bliss, but ignorance can be peaceful. So, and I absolutely understand ignorance can be peaceful. And if that's their peace, I'm happy to maintain that. I hope I answered your question. And have you had that? I mean, of course you have. Your family's great.
Sending the question right back at
Yeah.
me.
No, I'm sure you have.
I have, but it has felt very much like a one-way conversation with someone telling me how they experience me and not really checking for any reason behind why they may have experienced me in this way. So I I think I like to go back to the safe space of, if it were physical health, would we have lots of talks about it? And I don't think really, when someone is, has a chronic condition that shows up physically, people do really want to talk about it all that much. So we might be trying to bully ourselves a little bit by saying we don't talk about mental health. I don't think as a society we don't really talk about, we don't have casual conversations about cancer and you know chronic other chronic illnesses that people experience. So I I can't say that I have had a deep chat with anyone other than a medical professional about my mental health. Um, I think a lot of the time mental health can be so easily weaponized, and when it is given, when that power is given to someone who's not got the emotional intelligence to carry it, it can end up doing quite a bit of damage, um, in my experience. So that's not to say that I'm not in a very blessed position. My way of experiencing the world is understood as being a full and, you know, colorful reality for me, in the same way that I respect other people's ways of viewing their realities. Um, I think just sometimes certain boundaries get crossed when mental health is in the picture, because people who really have no education, nor do they want to be educated, but they just want, they have some therapy they haven't gone to, and then I become their ground zero for all of their unprocessed stuff, and that is a bit, it's again making it about you, which it's fine, but it's also a little bit tone deaf. So I can't say, I don't know. I think Black families do talk about mental health, but I think there's still a real ignorance with which it's dealt with. And I don't think it's just Black families, I think it's families in general. You, you're with this group of very colorful characters who are in your intimate circle, who know a little bit about you, and then they know that you're struggling in some particular area, and everybody's got something to say, or you know, if it's not to your face, then it's behind your back. So I just, I ride the wave. I don't really try to make my mental health people's business as much as I think. I would say that I'd be happy if no one spoke about my mental health until I'm speaking about my mental health. Because I don't, unless my grandmother's saying, I feel dizzy, I'm not going to bring up her blood pressure. Like, it's just use similar cues to what you would with physical ailments, and we might get along.
Yeah. No, no, no. I hear you on that part, and I agree with you so much. Um, because for me, that's what like your mental health is. It's something very sacred, and you can't just trample on it and just bring it up when I don't. And you always say that I'm very vocal about it, and I am, but only if it's a conversation, and only if I feel safe enough to have that conversation. And I think, but also it has been a little bit of a downfall, right? Because if people aren't aware, because there was a time when I literally, my life was revolved around working, and all I did was I worked, and I would not sleep. And again, what I always say, if you're working, if you're always busy, you don't have time to feel. But when I had my crash and my nervous breakdown and my mental breakdown, it was, what? What do you mean? But she was so fine. She was okay. What are you, pretty funny? She was cracking jokes the other day. What are you talking about? And now you have to break it down, and they're like, are you not okay? And just like, actually, I'm not. And that's where I was like, ish, maybe that, because maybe I could have gotten help sooner. Maybe the conversation would have helped sooner. But I think for me it was a matter of you can't cry for help if you don't know where to cry for help, or if there's no help to cry for. So I think understanding that's when you're like, yeah, but I'm not going to scream if there's no one around and there's no one to help me. So I will just keep quiet. Unfortunately, when you bottle that in, it does explode. But yes, I completely agree with, don't bring it up until I do. And until, of course, it is a safe space. Because, I mean, this is not taxi rank conversations. It's not shebeen or club conversations. These conversations are mostly had in private, in therapy rooms, where they even have a confidentiality to maintain. It's not done publicly. It is something very, very personal. But has that also affected us? Has that also been our downfall of it being such a personal thing when it's actually such a public thing, where the effects are from your external stimulus that actually did this, so, or that makes you feel this way? So maybe it is a stigma around it of us saying, hey, maybe it's a private conversation, maybe it shouldn't be. But how do we start that conversation without making people uncomfortable? Without making the people who are experiencing this even more vulnerable or misunderstood or not heard, or being thought as lazy, and the ignorant one throwing all the harsh terms. How do we steer away from that? And we can't stop how people base their opinions on. Can't. But yeah, it's a double-edged sword, man. It really is. It really is, because on one side you say, hey, listen, I absolutely understand how you feel, but maybe that is the problem. That is the problem right there. Because I think with my family, if I sit them down now and be like, okay, guys, so let's discuss depression and ADHD, they'll be like, why? why? But why are you not well? Are you not fine? Or they'll just be like, oh, bruh, I don't know, just take a pill or something. And I'm not talking about uneducated people. I'm talking about educated people here. My mom is doing a PhD, bro. I'm talking about smart individuals, not just people who don't know about these things. People know, but they're just like, oh, it's a conversation. But also for me, it would be very uncomfortable. I could never do it. To be like, okay, I could never do it. Because again, it's not a safe space. Because I didn't also make it my safe space, and they didn't make it their safe space for us to have those conversations. So, hey, let's go make a cup of tea and call it a day. But yeah, absolutely hear you on that part.
And coming from a background where your family are traditional healers, how do you feel about how where traditional healing fits in mental health?
Um, sorry.
No, I was just going to follow up with just in the general why Black families don't talk about mental health. I wanted to maybe change the question to be how Black families
Oh,
talk about mental
yes.
health, because we might be talking about it, but it might be in different
Yes, or
terminology.
approach differently.
Yeah.
I think with my experience, based on your question, is when it's a tricky one because automatically when you are I'll make an example. When you are suicidal, they said, oh no, it's because you know the neighbor is trying to bewitch you, or because you're too smart, or because you have spiritual warfare going on within you. And then they would try obviously to take you to a traditional healer. But that I'm being very, very general about that, and it's not based on self experience. In my own family, it's completely different, and we don't mix the two. It's Yeah, for us, traditional healing has always been something very practical that we see. It's the herbs, it's the warts, it's this, and I have a sore, I'm going to do this. So now when we're dealing with something that you can't see, it's a little bit harder for them to understand and diagnose. So it's hence I'm saying that for me, I'm very grateful that I was exposed to all those worlds where even therapy came in, and therapy is a little bit more physical because now we have your psychiatrist that can actually prescribe you medication to help you and whatnot, whatnot, whatnot. But then it can be argued, but those things alter your brain chemistry. They do this, they adjust this, they have long term after effects. But in a traditional sense, how would that be approached? It's still going to be approached in a different form. And yes, it is discussed, but in different ways, because instead of us just giving you a pill, now we are going to call upon your forefathers to ask them what the issue is. So it's crazy because it's like, how now do we have that conversation? I mean, it's hard for us to get out of a hospital, and then after the hospital they're like, yeah, let's go to a traditional healer, which is very common, mind you. Let's go to traditional healer. It is very hard for a traditional healer to tell you good news, FYI. I've never, in my experience, and I've never heard of you going to go consult and they have good news. It's never good. It's always something dark, and it's always, oh, you are being attacked, or this is happening, or who is trying to kill you, or your forefathers are angry, or it's never anything good. And that's the honest truth. I've never where you go then like, oh, listen, everything is good. So it's never good. And that's the dark side, because now you need to deal with that. But then you go to a therapist, they're like, ah, man, you just have ADHD, you just have a concentration problem. That's fine. We can diagnose you Ritalin, you'll be fine. And we're just like, okay, now it's it's very different. So it confuses you. It's very confusing because you're out here, you're popping a pill, you're praying at night, you're drinking your water, and you're consulting. So it's like you're doing all the things of the Holy Trinity, and which one is supposed to work? And so I'm like, it's a trial and error. So how is traditional healers how have they approached mental illness? I have no idea. I have no idea because I can't say that there's a method that has worked for me or there's a method that I have tried, or if it's a conversation that I've ever had with them. Because again, that requires you to go there and be like, oh, I'm so depressed. Oh, you're depressed because your neighbor's trying to bewitch you. Ow, but how did we get there? So I'm not saying that has ever happened, but I have no idea how they would deal with it, because I've never went there for such ailments. You go there because, I don't know, I've never went there myself. It's always been a family thing. But and remember that traditional healers, we can't consult within the family. You don't do that. You can't conjure your ancestors. If you're the healer and you're conjuring your own ancestors to help your family, that's not how it's done. You can't in our language you say meaning that you can't consult your family, because then you're calling upon your own people and they will not show you what you need to see. So I can't say that my grandmother has ever helped with that, because you can't consult you with your own family.
I think that's where we'll leave it today. Not with answers, but with a bit more language for things we felt for a long time. And maybe that's the point, not to solve it, but to recognize it. And start recognizing it. To notice how we've been talking about mental health all along, just in ways we didn't really understand. And maybe to be a little softer with ourselves and with our families too, because for a lot of them, silence wasn't neglect, it was survival. And if you're listening to this and you're in that space where you feel misunderstood or like you have to carry things alone, just know that your experience is valid. Whether you call it depression, sadness, spiritual warfare, or just, I'm not okay, it counts. We don't have to have the perfect words. We just have to start somewhere. One conversation at a time, even if it starts with yourself. So this has been What We Don't Say. Take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you in the next one.